ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Second City. Tonight, we're very pleased to bring you scenes from the Second City directly here in Chicago in the Cabaret nightclub into your theater in the home. These scenes were originally improvised by actors, both on ideas that they had and lines that they made up as they went along, and from suggestions from the audience. Audiences such as you see here tonight at the Second City.
Hi, I'm Dave Thomas. Along with the other distinguished faces that you just saw, I too was a graduate of Second City. Well, when I say graduate, I mean nobody really graduates from Second City. What usually happens is, when you get good enough, you quit, so you do a film or a television role. Or, if you hang around the stage too long, they fire you. So on one hand, the Second City is a benevolent university for comedy. On the other hand, it's a cruel, harsh, downsizing corporation, but that's good. That keeps us comics sharp, on top of our game, which is where we want to be. Join me now as we take a look at the history of Second City and the fine comedians who are part of that tradition.
I turned 19 on my last day of high school. My last exam was Concepts in Literature. It was at 9 o'clock out in Stephen Leacock in Scarborough. I got on the TTC. I came downtown. My audition was at 12, and I was hired at 3. So on my last day of high school, I got hired for the Second City Touring Company.
Okay, name. Austin Danger Powers. Sex? Yes, please.
It was my college, you know. I went from high school to Second City, and I felt like I got accepted to Harvard.
Second City was monumental in every aspect of my career after I did it, Second City Stage, because it taught you to trust your instincts. It taught you to realize that you could get even bigger laughs without being worried about the punchline and joke, but just by aping human behavior.
No, that doesn't seem to be it.
I was on the transition from City TV, where I was an announcer, to Second City, and they just signed the lease on Adelaide, and upstairs, lo and behold, there was a room near the ice cream coolers, and I said, and I moved in for a couple. So I was living above the theater, eating ice cream at night, after the shows and performing and rehearsing.
I could have done Second City for the rest of my life, I think. It just was such an opportunity for an actor, especially somebody in comedy who liked to improvise.
Take advantage of a man in a wheelchair!
For me, Second City, as hard as it was the best comedy training I ever could have had anywhere, bar none. It has completely helped me with everything else I've ever done.
The first Second City stage show that I went to was to see my brother John. And it was, I still think to this day, the funniest show that Second City has ever had. And that moment, at the end of the show, I said, I want to be part of this magic.
It was an opportunity to get up on 6 nights a week and become who you were, because it was uncensored and because it was cast written. It was a great opportunity for self-expression.
I worked at Second City on the door as the night manager, and then they had auditions one Saturday afternoon while I was setting up the theater, and they said, the next 6 people on stage, and so I kind of went up with one of the 6 people, and you can stay, you can go, and later that afternoon I was in the touring company.
Take me in your arms.
I guess they needed a tall guy. Because, at that time, that's what Second City was, We need the fat guy, the tall guy, the blonde, and the Jewish girl, okay? And we'll throw in, like, a heavy-set guy, too. It gave me the chance to work with a lot of really good people and to work as a cast.
It really was, in many ways, a college of comedy. It's where I learned, from performing every night, how to work towards laughs, how to back off from laughs. It truly was the best post-secondary school education I ever got.
You think I'm funny?
You're funny!
You think so? Because people say I'm funny, but it's like, I don't see it,
The first Second City show I saw, I remember going up to the stage afterwards and sort of just touching the stage and thinking, oh my gosh, Gilda Radner performed on this stage.
I don't know what I would have been without Second City. I don't know where I would have ended up, because I was in rocky emotional shape. I'd come out of a marriage that had fallen apart, and I had no career, so I just didn't know who I was or what I was or where I belonged. It saved my life.
So as you can see, the Second City is a lot more than a place where a bunch of comedians honed their skills. It actually saved Alan Arkin's life. Well, it didn't save everybody's life. Actually, it destroyed my life. I mean, I got divorced, I lost my house, I started drinking. I really hit rock bottom. Just kidding. Well, not about getting divorced and losing my house, but about the drinking. I just made that up because, well, you know, comedy works best in threes. Hey, but on with the show. We're going to show you how one little theater stage launched the careers of several generations of comedians. And what better place to start that story than where all good stories begin, the beginning. Second City's roots reach back here to the Windy City, where in the mid-50s, a group of hip and creative theater students met at the University of Chicago.
When they finished school, they started a theater called Playwrights Theater Club and asked me to come aboard as sort of a director. Well, it turned out I was the only director. The only one who knew how to balance a checkbook. We had a nice run for 2 years, did a lot of great plays, the Shakespeare Festival, a lot of Brecht, a lot of Sartre, a lot of everybody.
Playwrights gave many of the city's talented actors, people like Ed Asner, Mike Nichols, and Elaine May, a place to hone their skills. But they were forced to shut down when they couldn't meet the city's fire code.
I went off and did another big theater, and then Paul Sills, who was the spiritual and leader and director of the group, started something called Compass Players.
While the Compass was a critical success, it was a financial bust, lasting just 18 months. Mike Nichols and Elaine May took the material they'd created there and went on to become big stars on Broadway and television. But the rest of the cast, well, they were at loose ends.
Everybody else being out of work, we were sitting around with nothing to do. So we decided, because it was 59, there was the Beats around, we'd have a coffee shop.
It was just going to be a coffee house where friends could gather and talk. And then they had this other space, and they figured, well, we can do a little show.
We opened on a very cold December 16th, 1959, expecting nobody, and there were lines. We held 120 people. We filled up rapidly.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Second City.
I myself, 1,000 of that 120 since then, of course.
Building on what they'd started at the Compass, Second City would revolutionize the world of comedy.
Ahoy there! Ahoy! Sophia! I be Captain Ahab. Have you seen anything of a great white whale? Aye, about 3 days back, we killed him. Damn it.
And it was called the Second City as a reference to a series of articles in the New Yorker magazine by A.J. Liebling, which in a very snotty way referred to Chicago as the Second City.
Second culturally, second rate. So in a gesture of complete defiance, we decided to name it the Second City.
Comedy theoretically is irreverent by nature, but this was irreverent in a way. America was kind of waking up from the slumber of the 50s.
Even if there are only one communist in the State Department, that will still be one communist too many.
The Senator Joe McCarthy, the Red Witch Hunter, had pervaded the atmosphere, and it was really a time almost of repression. And to go out on stage and say Eisenhower, ooh, that was like sex, you know?
It was the beginning of a time of rest, and it was an acknowledgement of the fact that not everything was as beautiful as the Eisenhower administration seemed to think it was, and that we didn't live in a Donna Reed and Leave It to Beaver world.
So there was Second City, suddenly doing what polite visitors don't do, which is talking about religion and politics.
Back then, Alan Arkin was struggling to make a living as an actor in New York. Desperate for work, he called Paul Sills, who said, "Hey, why don't you come to Chicago?"
Second City had just been open literally a couple of months. Nobody had heard of it, so I went there thinking, well, that's the end of my life, but at least I'll be making a living in an area that I know something about. And I went there, and 6 months after I got there, we started getting national attention, and that was the beginning of everything.
Coach Harden's my name.
How do you do, sir? It's a pleasure to meet you.
Well, very nice to meet you.
The structure of the Second City show back then was the same as it is today. No story, and often not even a theme. Just a collection of unrelated sketches connected only by the cast who performed them. The first half of the show was set, filled with surefire material they'd rehearsed and polished from improvisations discovered in front of an audience. That guaranteed some laughs. But what they did in the second half was truly revolutionary back then. They would take suggestions from the audience and then turn those suggestions into improvised, funny sketches.
We will need some suggestions from you in the audience. First of all, we'd like you to suggest a character. A peanut vendor, thank you. And
We have another character.
Another one, please.
Over here, perhaps.
And we'd get about, I guess, 30, 40 suggestions from the audience, and then go backstage and sweat like horses in terror, trying to come up with the second half of the show.
What are you doing there?
I'm strewing flour.
Chris, those are peanut shells. What are you talking about?
They're my own kind of flour.
That's terrible. That's a desecration.
Improv terrified me initially. I didn't feel myself a particularly spontaneous person then. Noah's Ark scene came out of somebody yelling out in the audience they wanted to see a scene about an aardvark.
Hello, God. God, it's me, Noah. Noah. Yeah, N-O-A-H, Noah. Yeah, with the boat, Noah.
The crucial thing about all of this to me was the fact that it was a place where not only could you fail, but the audience came in knowing that you were going to fail part of the time, that they were going to see stuff that wasn't completely set. The first half of the show was set, but then the second half was going to be some stuff that might be glorious, and the thing right next to it might be just awful. And it was okay.
What's all this? I'm an aardvark. What is it, aardvark?
You know, the only way you learn is by failure. Failure is a great, great teacher. And we had an opportunity to have a great teacher every night we were on stage.
Yeah, he's an aardvark. Because I want him, that's why. An aardvark! I didn't make him. Look it up in the dictionary what it is.
If the tour will please step this way, you will see that this painting is really very interesting because it's not really a painting at all.
One of the reasons that Second City was so successful at the beginning is that it was at a time when comedy was just changing from stand-ups doing mother-in-law jokes and just flew in from Las Vegas and boy are my arms tired jokes to a more personal, a less joke-oriented, more story-oriented, more character-oriented kind of comedy.
Here I am in Chicago, in the hot gas.
In this Second City classic, Alan Arkin plays a beatnik trying to pick up Barbara Harris in an art gallery.
I don't mean to seem like a prude, but you're gonna get kicked out of here if you don't watch out.
I don't care, I gotta speak my mind.
They kind of represented a left-wing intellectual fringe, and that their focus was kind of psychoanalytical and sociological and political, as opposed to most of the comedy that was happening.
You dig that, huh?
Well, what do you mean by that?
A dig?
Yes.
I mean, does it grab you?
Oh, what an interesting idea. Well, what do you mean by that?
You know what I mean, like a...
Where?
in the guts.
Oh, for heaven's sake. Well, let's see.
We were smart, and we were dealing with the issues everybody was interested in the world. Everybody on stage had done extensive reading, was enormously literate, and they read the papers. I mean, there was a lot of, everybody was up on current events.
develop this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated.
Once you landed in Nevada, did you have any trouble?
No, I got a cab right away.
No, not
You
a
see,
cab.
that was part of it. Immediately I said to the cab driver, I said, "Are your people ready to overthrow their government?"
What did you do?
Well, they took me to see, guess who?
Who?
Castro.
Fidel Castro?
That's his name, that's the one.
Yeah, Fidel Castro.
And I was supposed to find out where all of his gun emplacements were.
Oh, spy work, huh?
Yeah.
How'd you go about finding that out?
Well, I was a little bit tipsy at the time, I'm afraid. And I said to him, "Where are all your gun emplacements?"
He wouldn't tell you that.
He told me.
Just a minute, that's incredible. How come the invasion turned out to be such a fiasco?
He lied. Never trust him again, that sneaky spick.
Can't trust a South American.
No.
What about you? Did he try to pump you, get anything out of you?
Oh, yeah. He wanted to know where we were going to land.
Yeah, but you wouldn't tell him that.
I told him.
Oh, I see. And of course you lied.
Of course not, I'm an American.
We felt we were doing something really potent. We felt like what we said on the stage there had some social and political meaning.
As you can see on the blackboard here, I've outlined a football field. It's roughly 30 by 100 yards long.
Roughly, sir?
Oh, my diagram. Yes, it's a little off. On the field, it's 100 yards long.
Exactly.
Yes.
I can accept that.
In this sketch, Second City reinforces its smart comedy aimed at a university audience in Chicago. Andrew Duncan is the coach, trying to teach football to three intellectuals.
Oh, let's look at it in practice, gentlemen. This is what we're going to be playing with. There it is, the All-American football.
Well, that's an odd shape, isn't it?
Yes, it's not actually round.
No, that's so you can pass and kick it.
It's a demi-polytetrahedron.
No. That's a Spalding. They put that out. Very good ball.
It plays a tune.
No, just leaking a little air. I didn't pump it up tonight. Gentlemen, this ball has had a very interesting history.
Oh?
It used to be made from the skin of a pig. It's now made from the skin of a calf.
Aha, well, that's understandable,
I'm
sir.
sure Throckmorton could tell us why.
All right, Throckmorton, tell us why.
Why, the Muslims wouldn't be able to touch it.
Oh, no.
And of course the Jews wouldn't be able to eat it.
Oh, no.
We did not use, and not out of prudishness, but it never is to use the F word, the S word, the C word, or any of the words. I don't know if I can even say them here.
1, 2, 3, hike! No, on a hike, you'd be right in to get that ball. Come on, right up there. Body contact, little body contact. Drive in there, come on, right up there. Come on, get that ball. Get that ball, come on, get in there. Come on, your ball side, get in there, get that ball. Oh. What's the matter with you? What's wrong?
I won't do it.
Why not?
Because I hardly know him.
We were very big on homophobia. There was a lot of homophobic material. There was we weren't quite comfortable enough to do anything that smacked of gay. I think we would have had another 5 years. We would have done that.
It's part of Second City's mission to violate taboos right up to the point of bad taste, but not up to it, not reaching it.
With its popularity assured in Chicago, Solz took the show on the road to New York City and London, England. They also made regular trips north of the border to Toronto, where they played at the newly opened Royal Alex Theatre. And they appeared on Canadian television, too.
The world sure is full of trouble these days.
That cost me a nickel to find that out, I know that.
People are very insecure.
You're making them like that with it. I'm scared to death from this.
Politicians aren't to be trusted.
Their intellectual comedy was a natural fit with the country's premier news magazine show.
For the Second City Company and 7 Days, Avery Schreiber and Jack Burns have devised a comment on the kind of faith healer prevalent in the Southwest United States. Meet the Reverend Moley.
Tell me, son, do you believe? Do you believe? Speak up, boys. It's there.
I can't hear you. You got your fingers on my ear.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right.
That's the good ear.
All right. Do you believe?
Yes, I do.
You Christian thought indeed?
Yes, I am.
You go to church every Sunday?
I do.
Washed in the blood of the Lamb?
That's right, everything.
All right. Then come with me. Oh, Lord, I've been toiling in your vineyard for 20 years. I've never seen a mess quite like this. So, Lord, I ask you now, in front of all my witnesses, to use me, and straighten this boy, straighten his back, straighten his spine, straighten his mind, straighten his legs, straighten his arms, straighten his head, make him a tall Christian in your army. Oh, Lord, I beg of you, amen. Well, a little more faith, son. Put some money in the pot. We'll try again next week. Now, my friends, the gospel singers.
Oh, Reverend, look, you did it. Good me. I'm straight. I'm straight.
You put me on. Oh, my God, it's a miracle.
Throughout the 60s, Second City's cast rotated, and a new generation of comic actors joined the company. Among them, Joan Rivers, Fred Willard, Robert Klein, and Canadian comic David Steinberg.
You have another one coming up now. That's right, Dave. What's it called? It's called What Strange What's it about, man? It's about death. We feel, honestly, though, kids, if you don't know about dying, you don't know about living. How about that?
Toward the end of the 60s, the Second City was given an opportunity to play at a theater in New York. Well, Bernie wanted to get rid of the cast anyway, so he gave it the thumbs up.
So I said to the actors, I'm taking you to New York. You can make your fortune. And it wasn't untrue. I said, but I don't know if we can have you back. Do you want to go to New York? Of course we want to go to New York.
That cast never returned to Chicago.
Bernie took the company that was on stage to New York, never to be seen again. And I took the touring company and put them on in Chicago. And their show was called The Next Generation. And they were terrific. It was Brian Doyle Murray, Harold Ramis, Joe Flaherty.
When we came in, we were the next generation. That's what we were called, which I thought that was pretentious. You know, like we were the young Turks, that we were going to show it. And that was like off of the 60s too, you know, we had the long hair and we were like Beatles, I guess, or whatever.
I think the other company was feeling a little stale, and I think they were never kind of political enough for Bernie. And America had become so polarized and politicized through the civil rights movement and the war in Vietnam that we were addressing it directly.
They'd been through the revolutionary period and retained enough of it to be interesting, but not so much of it as to be hostile.
Bernie Sahlins had a motto, which was always work from the top of your intelligence.
You have to, that the audience is at least as smart as you are. When you play down to an audience, you know, when you start doing comedy, you think, well, I don't think it's funny, it's, you know, stupid, but they'll like it. It doesn't work. It just falls flat on its face.
I'm not the bravest person, sometimes, and I often played really cowardly characters. And Joe kind of understood that about me, and he was able to feed that.
He was just shy. He was very shy, and he I think he always preferred writing, but he did, you know, like to act.
Once I had a secret love.
Who is it?
It's the nurse.
The nuts.
Did he say nurse? Did he say nurse?
Damn it! What are you freaking out?
I'm not freaking out!
Hi, we're your new neighbors. I'm Bill Nark. This is my wife.
I kept taking long sabbaticals, and I never thought I was going to return, but I always did. I was in Europe, and Joe Flaherty wrote me a card saying that they'd hired a little Albanian guy to replace me.
That little Albanian guy turned out to be John Belushi.
John Belushi was one of the few, if not the only, actors who walked out on that stage and got hired immediately.
What shocked me when I came back to work with him on stage was that I had been the long-haired zany. I was the freaked out guy. And John was younger and zanier. So there seemed to be no point in fighting him to be alpha male on the stage. He was just, audiences would just laugh as soon as he walked on stage. Didn't have to say a word, just wiggle his eyebrows.
John's incredible stage presence soon landed him a spot on Saturday Night Live. After that, he starred in Animal House, which was co-written by Harold Ramis. Then he teamed up with Dan Aykroyd for the Blues Brothers. By this time, John was a big star in Hollywood. His brother Jim followed him to the Second City stage 6 years later. He remembers the only time they appeared there together.
I gotta tell you, to this day, I have never felt the rush of excitement and applause that went through an audience when John walked on stage. It was like a vacuum. And Will and I were like, whoa. And turned, and John just walked on stage, and they just applauded him. Up and mimed for a beer, and they were still screaming. Drank the beer down, they were still screaming. We're like sitting there stumped. He walks over to a jukebox and mimes playing some songs. Then they didn't stop. So John just exited. And we were left on stage just lost. We didn't know what to do. He finally opened the door back up and said, "Come on, I know there's a gay street," and we left, you know.
Bernie Sahlins decided to open the Second City in Toronto in 1973 because of a successful run he'd had at the Royal Alex in the 60s. When word got out that the Second City was coming to town, a bunch of hungry young Canadian comedians were there, waiting, salivating, and I was one of them. Well, I wasn't a comedian yet, but I was hungry. Boy, was I hungry. Actually, I'm kind of hungry right now. Well, anyway, let's back up and put things in perspective. 2 years earlier, Eugene Levy, Martin Short, and I met at McMaster University in Hamilton. There was no drama school at McMaster, but we met doing some extracurricular plays and hit it off immediately. We were baby boomers, raised on television and movies, and our dream was to do a show about that. Anyway, after we graduated, we all headed to Toronto, and oddly enough, about that same time, Danny Aykroyd and Valerie Bromfield left Ottawa for Toronto, and Gilda Radner left Detroit for Toronto, and Andrea Martin left Maine for Toronto, Paul Schaefer left Thunder Bay for Toronto, and John Candy, well, he was already in Toronto, at Eaton's, working in the sporting goods department. And coincidentally, at that time, some New York producers decided to open a production of Godspell in Toronto.
It was almost like an American Idol, Canadian Idol kind of thing. They wanted fresh, young talent that hadn't been tapped.
I had just gotten out of college. I graduated from the University of Toronto and was, you know, playing on Yonge Street, topless bars. And I used to also play rehearsal piano. And I would rehearse a number with them and then I'd go and accompany them at their audition. And this for a number of people who were going to audition for the Godspell show.
Everyone was there. Again, very crowded, and people supporting people, that thing, you know, like Fame. I remember Gilda Radner got up, and I'd never met Gilda. She had pigtails, and she sang, zippity-doo-dah, zippity-yeah. And I thought, that poor thing, that's so sad. But she had seen the show, you see, so she had a leg up. She knew what they were looking for. And they said, right away, we'll sign her.
I sang, If They Could See Me Now, That Little Gang of Mine, and just kind of got down on my knees and da-da-da-da-da. I just went as big as I possibly could, and fortunately, it suited one of the characters that they were looking for.
I sang My Funny Valentine. They weren't quite sure, but they called me back, you know, and then you kept being called back as the day went on. And I remember Paul Schaefer, who at that time was playing piano for a friend, and they didn't much like her, but they said, who's that guy playing the piano?
This guy named Stephen Schwartz was the composer. He liked the way I played the song from that show, and that very day he said, could you put a band together and become the conductor? And all of a sudden I was in theater.
Was the king? Yeah. Who decided to settle accounts with the men who served him.
Godspell opened in Toronto to rave reviews. In addition to Marty, Gilda, and Jane, Eugene Levy and Martin were in the cast. I joined the cast of Godspell about a year later when some of the bigger players got bored and quit the show. Now, I gotta admit, I didn't get into this musical because I love singing and dancing. I joined the cast of Godspell because I was a devoutly religious person, and it seemed like a good way for me to explore my faith. I'm kidding, okay? I mean, I'm a little bit religious. I really did the show to work with those funny people. At that time, Marty and Eugene rented a house on Avenue Road. After Marty and Eugene moved out, Sheldon Patinkin, the director of Second City, moved in, and after him, John Candy rented the house. So while this house changed hands a number of times, somebody or other connected to Second City lived there for almost an entire decade. It's where I first met John Candy, Valerie Bromfield, and Dan Aykroyd.
If you want to take and really put your finger on a geographical locus for Canadian comedy that's influenced the world, you gotta go to 1063 Avenue Road for the great, great evenings of humor and music.
I think everyone who represented Canadian entertainment for the next 20 years would end up partying there, or we used to do a lot of, Paul would play the piano and people would get up and perform.
Everybody was really at their funniest because the audience was each other.
it was that gang, you know, we were always kind of hanging out and laughing and having incredible feasts at John Candy's house, and he'd never feed us till midnight.
I don't know who lives there now, but I go by and I think of those nights when we used to just improv and have fun and sing and you know, exchange humor. And
Then Second City came to town to hold auditions.
And we came up to Toronto, along with Bernie Sahlins, and those were the amazing auditions that became legendary.
To this day, I'm not even sure why I went to that audition, because I heard that you had to do 5 characters on stage, like keep going through the revolving door and come out as a different character. I said, I can't, you're crazy. There's no way I can do that. I was never like that type of performer. But I auditioned for it, and I got it. I couldn't believe it. And the thing is, you know, my gang was auditioning for it.
we knew that this was the holy grailization comedy writing, and that we knew of all the famous people that had gone on to great careers. And we tried to get an audition, and we came in at the very last minute. Bernie Sahlins and Joyce were leaving for the airport, basically. And so we managed to scream in there. And I think it was me, Candy, and Valerie.
And met us at the airport and did their act in Terminal 2 or whatever one. They were good. We said, sure.
Now, John was very young when he auditioned for us. He was just in his teens still.
But we liked him so well, I offered him a job in Chicago.
It was fun. It was great. I had a great time. I really learned a lot. I really grew up when I went there in a lot of ways. My first time away from home, really. And it was Chicago, you know. Bars were open till 5 in the morning. It was good times. I was meeting all sorts of interesting people.
John Candy joined the Chicago main stage in the same week as another soon-to-be big star, Bill Murray.
Come on, all right? Where you been? I've been gone for 6 months.
Well, after school, there was a party. And then everybody went to Denver.
Everyone was saying to me, hey, you should do Second City. And I kept thinking, maybe they all seem to be dying to do it, and I'm just kind of being told to do it. So probably the best way to do it is when you yourself are dying to do it. So I didn't join Second City until 1977. And at that time, I was dying to do it.
So the first Second City cast in Toronto was a mix of Chicago imports Joe Flaherty and Brian Doyle Murray, and locals Gilda Radner, Jerry Salzberg, Jane Eastwood, Valerie Bromfield, and Dan Aykroyd. They opened in an old abandoned warehouse on Adelaide Street in June of 1973.
We got great reviews. There was only one thing wrong. We had no liquor license.
Bernie didn't know how to get a liquor license. He thought it was Chicago, where you just kind of slipped him some money, you know, under the table. No, not Toronto. No, it doesn't work that way.
And it was 98 degrees outside for days, and we had no air conditioning. So between the people not being able to drink and being drenched in sweat, we didn't do too well.
6 months after it opened, the theater was bankrupt.
We went under, and that was it. There's a big padlock on the door. Notice from the sheriff, theater's closed.
When Second City closed, we went on suicide watch for each other. Because we had no hope of making it in Canadian showbiz unless, of course, we wanted to narrate wildlife documentaries for the National Film Board. And hey, we love the loon and the woodchuck as much as the next person, but we had dreams. That's where a Canadian promoter by the name of Andrew Alexander came to the rescue. Back then, he'd fallen in love with the Second City while working in Chicago.
Well, you know, it was an opportunity, and it seemed like an exciting thing to do because I just love the theater. And I thought, geez, you know, if this works here so well, why wouldn't it work in Toronto?
Well, I do remember being at this bar with you one night.
Yeah.
Talking about Toronto.
Yeah.
The story goes that Andrew went to Bernie and bought the Canadian rights for Second City for $1 and then signed the deal on a cocktail napkin.
And but I do remember jotting it out, something.
Yeah.
The notes.
Okay, I'll go with you that far. I'll take that.
Yeah.
But from then on, it becomes myth.
Or, you know, you get something for $1 from an American. You know, you really yanked an American. So in Canada, that's big news.
That wasn't the substance of the agreement. The agreement had a rate of royalty payment and so forth and so on.
That's true.
Andrew borrowed money and leased the old fire hall on Lombard Street, right around the corner from where the Second City had closed a year earlier.
Obviously, the first order of business was I needed a cast. John Candy actually was in Chicago at Second City at that time, and when kind of opened, John moved back. So, I went around to get Danny and Gilda and Joe and Eugene, and then Rosemary Radcliffe. And they were all very reluctant, and because they had all had the trauma of going to work one day, and I guess it was a big padlock on the old location. And what was I going to do that was going to be so different? And I said, I have a liquor license.
He said, we're going to do this as dinner theater. I'm going to sell it along with it. And I thought, that's kind of tacky, we always made fun of dinner theater. But if that's the only way we can go, let's do it.
Sit down, will you? I got something I got to tell you.
Certainly, lad. What's on your mind?
I hate hockey! I've always hated hockey, but you couldn't see that. Well, I'm not listening to you anymore, and I'm not going back to that hockey camp.
You son of a bitch.
I remember the first few months, it was a little rough. People couldn't quite get the food and the show together. People would come down complaining about not getting served dinner, and be in a bad mood. We had to come out and do a show, entertain them.
I joined the Second City cast in 1974 in a show called Alterations While You Wait. My addition was that I had to improvise with the regular cast every night after the set show for a week. So I would sit in the audience and watch these funny people do the set show, and then I'd have to get up on stage with them later and do the improvs. I was terrified because they were just so funny. I remember John Candy and Danny doing this weird sketch called Freaks about a couple of stoners. Oh, their characters were just so good.
Accent that I heard when I was traveling through the sets, it's at Philadelphia, I was kind of in Pennsylvania. They say, let's go down the road and we'll go and get some catfish, and it's like, that was all it was. It was a guy I heard in Pennsylvania once. He was like, Jesus, that's a freaky accent, and he was a hippie. So I did him, and John was sort of between Dr. Tongue and, and another character, and we kept our hair shoulder length. We were the freaks of Second City at that time.
And Catherine O'Hara was amazing. I mean, she was, I think, the funniest woman I ever saw. Her characters were so quirky and original. I remember wanting to impress her and make her laugh just to validate my own existence on that stage.
The greatest thing I remember about it is just being able to use anything that came to mind and doing it with friends. Anything that you thought of in the day, anyone that you met during the day you thought was an interesting character, you could do something about them that night. You could do something about any stupid idea that came to your head.
Catherine and I, we did the people that we saw living in Lower Town and the people we saw living in downtown Toronto. The people, they're our neighbors. There was women and men that were there, and they talk like that.
My name's Sharon. You can call me Penny. Nice to meet you. It's fun living around here. Go down to the Minion House, have a few beers. Sometimes the stupid pigs stop you on the street on your way home.
Absolutely credible.
Yeah, I put you in there for the night, and there's no getting home. Then you don't, the night you get out, what do you do?
We were soaking that culture in, all the newfies that were in there, people trying to make dreams for themselves, and we were living. I mean, we were making $175 a week, so these were not the big money days.
And Andrea Martin, well, you could set your watch by her on opening night. She was a surefire showstopper. And the fact that she went on to win Tony Awards on Broadway didn't surprise me one bit.
To me, the highlight was the scripted show, was those many weeks of improvisation, and finally I got a scene that worked, and then it was like, oh, thank God, I know the lines, and now I can get into the part.
The show itself, we weren't drawing any people, but interestingly enough, the improvisations of the show, the house would fill up. It was like the hottest ticket in town, but they were free.
Andrew Alexander was always taking heat. I mean, his checks would bounce. The audience was complaining about the food all the time. And I remember one night the plumbing broke, and we had sewage dropping on us backstage in the Second City, and I got really mad. And Andrew came to me, and he had a twinkle in his eye, and he said, Dave, one day you're going to remember these as the best days of your life. Well, I couldn't admit it back, but now I got to say, he was right.
Many times you'd see the sheriff pull up and, they would have some sort of claim against something. They'd be ready to take the chairs out or the tables out, and went on for at least 3 years like that.
Then Lorne Michaels started putting a cast together for a new show he was developing in New York, which later became Saturday Night Live. He took Danny, Gilda, and Valerie from the Toronto stage, and John Belushi from Chicago. A year later, he scooped Bill Murray, too. Andrew Alexander and Bernie Sahlins figured if they didn't do something soon, Saturday Night Live would ultimately take all of their comic talent.
I thought, oh my gosh, this is the new wave. I can barely keep the door open. And, you know, we were struggling in 1975, so that is actually what inspired us to get into SCTV.
So Andrew and Bernie put a cast together that included John Candy, Joe Flaherty and Eugene Levy, Andrea Martin, Catherine O'Hara, Harold Ramis, and me. And Second City Television was born.
And now, let's dance.
I ruined the show.
Hello, Your Holiness.
We were all a fan of SCTV. Come on. It was the funniest damn program on TV. Johnny LaRue?
You call this a Christmas bonus?
What's the idea?
Joe Flaherty? You a guy?
Was I an SCTV fan? Yeah, I loved SCTV, and intensely proud that it was Canadian.
SCTV was on the air.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Second City. Tonight, we're very pleased to bring you scenes from the Second City directly here in Chicago in the Cabaret nightclub into your theater in the home. These scenes were originally improvised by actors, both on ideas that they had and lines that they made up as they went along, and from suggestions from the audience. Audiences such as you see here tonight at the Second City.
Hi, I'm Scott Thompson. If you live in Toronto or Chicago, you probably know that Second City is the name of a comedy stage show famous for pioneering the art of improvisation. And no matter where you live, you might have watched a TV show on late-night television back in the early 80s called SCTV. But what you probably don't know is that the TV show grew out of the stage show that started in Chicago way back in 1958. I wasn't even born in 1958. At least that's what the internet says. But the reason I know all this is because I spent 8 long months in the Second City Touring Company studying its history until they decided I'd learned enough and fired me. But the real reason I loved SCTV was because their writing was character-driven. And like all great stories, their characters' lives deepened over time, until by the end of their run, they were more real than me. You see, they understood the character wasn't just about wigs or mustaches or hats. It was about what was in here. And this approach was definitely the biggest influence on our character work in Kids in the Hall. God bless SCTV.
Don't touch that dial. Don't touch that one either.
Second City first appeared on television on September 21st, 1976.
It's programming day.
Hello, boys and girls. It's me, Count Clyde.
The setting for the show was a low-budget little television station in Mellonville, wherever that was. And each half hour presented a combination of a programming day for their television station and the characters behind the cameras.
Come on over here. How are you?
Hi.
You on your way to work?
You on your way to work?
We said we'd do a second-rate television, which would then allow us to do bad sets and cheap costumes, make mistakes and all that.
Hi, I'm Edna Boyle. Me and my husband love you to come and visit us.
And then Global gave us a time slot and provided sort of the facility and cameras and crews and things like that. So that was how the first 7 shows came about.
Andrew's business partner, Len Stewart, put up the cash to finance the show.
Well, Andrew obviously brought the name Second City and his devotion to the theater world. And I brought the finance. So I put up the money, which was $35,000 for 7 television shows.
We thought, well, we have a low budget. Let's look low budget. We can't possibly look slick.
How many good snapshots have you missed because of poor lighting, defective...
Nobody knew anything about television, not even the producers. That's what made it so insane. I think if there had been experienced television people involved, we never would have done the show.
Space age laser attachment fits virtually any camera and packs enough energy to turn night into day. Everybody smile now.
Second City went after every aspect of television, and in the process, created a little weekly soap opera about the characters who worked in their cheesy little station.
We created this Johnny LaRue character. He had his own show. He was one of the big stars of the station.
A little thing called running on the spot. All set, and sit, and start running. Come on, get those knees.
I had to say a left-wing accountant, a Marxist accountant. And so I did it as a sunrise semester on the show.
Good morning. The program is Sunrise Semester. The course is Essentials of Bookkeeping, and I'm your instructor, Maurice Green.
So then the hook came up, well, what if he's Johnny's accountant and squandered all of John's money or embezzled it all?
Says here I only got $14.50.
Pleasure, not bad, Johnny.
You cheap punk, you ruined me! You ruined me!
Some of the classic SCTV characters were born in that first season.
Hi, everybody. Edith Ripley here.
The whole movie.
We had our news team, which was a Second City piece that Gene and I had done on stage.
I'm Floyd Robertson.
And I'm Earl Cannonbear.
And this is the SCTV AM News Today.
The SCTV News was one of the first regularly recurring sketches, with Joe Flaherty and Eugene Levy as Floyd and Earl.
I was the straight newscaster that was just annoyed with having to work with this guy, this other guy. And I would get all the good news items, and he would get the bad ones. And so it was obviously a relationship thing.
I mean, this disease-ridden herd of reindeer could destroy the...
You're making that up. So come in, Earl Cannonbear in New Delhi.
Thanks, Floyd. I'm here at Goldie's Delicatessen on 8th Street.
You idiot!
Take a look at yourself in the monitor. Doesn't look bad to me, Floyd.
Earl!
And that's the news.
I didn't want to play recurring characters, neither did Catherine. And I thought advertising was funny and ludicrous, and I wanted to expose some of that.
And Argyle. Say, even real socks don't cling that close. Why don't you try it?
As her, I just kind of ran the meeting in a way, just make sure we stayed on track and that we were productive. I wanted to use everything. If the concept was good but the piece wasn't, we would just use the concept as a promo for a show that we never had to do.
Coming up on our next show, a chat with the celebrated author of the bestseller, Your Weight is My Fortune, Mr. Ira Gessler. All this and more on Bath Talk every weekday morning at 7 o'clock here on SCTV. Join me, won't you?
It is not a case of numbers. Yeah, there's 2 girls and 5 guys or whatever at certain points, and you know, they get into this guys thing, and Andrea and I'd be like, and then a woman could walk in, and then the mother could walk in, then the girlfriend could walk in, you know. So in brainstorming, it was just you get overpowered that way.
Thousands of beautiful women like me are discovering that you don't have to be a sex object with a fabulous new treatment called Homelier You. Yes, for just 5 minutes a day in the privacy of your own bedroom, you can change from this
To this. Hey, Tony, how about that drink?
Hey, now you're talking.
Now, John Candy would come in with a napkin with 100 ideas, 2 of which he could remember.
Yeah, they're all here. Here, you. Pay it.
And out of that, a lot of it was dross, but there was always gold there, too. And whatever the premise was, then some people would start improvising with him on it, and that was how a lot of the material was created.
Bernie Sahlins went along with the parodies of television, but kept pushing for the kind of intelligent comedy that Second City presented on stage.
Bernie came from the theater, and Bernie, self-admittedly, never watched television, so there would be TV references, which were obviously there were a lot in that show, and he didn't know what they were talking about.
I remember I did a Chekhov piece, figuring if Bernie just sees the word Chekhov, he'll be satisfied.
I've been waiting for Chekhov all night. I haven't slept at all. But I'm still radiant. Am I not?
You know, but it was Mr. Chekhov, Star Trek, in a Chekhov play.
Captain! Captain!
Chekhov! You've come!
We not only watched TV, we studied television. So, I mean, we definitely had a difference of opinion there.
A send-up of the Oscar-winning classic Ben-Hur was one of SCTV's first movie parodies.
We'd written a parody and wrote it so big that production said, if you do this, it's the only piece you can do in the whole show. We won't be able to afford anything else. We started rehearsing it, and it was terrible. It was just flat as could be. Part of it was that John didn't really have a character.
It was really bad. And then John started fooling around playing, Judah Ben-Hur as Curly from the Three Stooges.
Wait a minute, Judah, do you see the wall? The one with the Roman governor in front of it. That's a tribune, not a... Judah, just hit that wall. Oh. Nice throw, Judah. You just killed the governor. Seize him.
We had the worst fake boat battle anybody has ever seen, and a chariot race that any Hollywood studio would have been proud to disclaim.
Hurry up! Hey, let's go!
It's a really funny parody. It's not satiric, it's just parody. Bernie didn't like things unless they were also satiric.
We had a resident director from Global Television who really didn't have any sketch or film experience.
So they brought in George Bloomfield to upgrade the directing. Dave Thomas and Eugene Levy had written and produced a pilot with Andrew and George called 1774, about the adventures of George Washington's evil brother.
George did a great job. He had great production values, so Gene and I lobbied to get him on SCTV.
Well, even California. Oh, Tom, the mudstones have been so bad. We can never use the pool or the tennis court no more.
SCTV started to change, and it started to cost more money, and we started to make it look better, make it look more like, real TV.
Between 1976 and 1977, the team produced 26 episodes of Second City Television. And after finishing these first shows, Sheldon Patinkin and Bernie Sahlins decided to leave.
Don't take my step, please! Don't take it! I need it, please! Don't leave it!
I left for a couple of reasons. When you're doing a television show, after the fourth or fifth one, you're just doing what you know. It becomes a chore. And I had other things to do.
I learned very quickly with that group because I knew them from the stage and I had so much confidence in them that I was not equipped to be sort of, making strong, artistic, creative decisions.
I mean, it was there. It really was. It was the actor-writer's show. And that was the only way it worked and the only way it could work. And anybody who wasn't on the exact same wavelength had to get out of it. Just had to.
In the summer of 1978, Andrew sent the cast to Los Angeles to write 3 months.
We went down to LA because Harold had written Animal House, and then Universal decided to make Animal House.
As a result, Harold didn't want to leave Los Angeles, so Andrew rented a house in Bel Air where Harold and the cast could work together.
And in 7 weeks, we wrote 15 scripts, I think, 15 half hours in 7 weeks. It was a very productive time.
There were 6 people who loved to watch television, but they didn't.
Now the show is being syndicated in 48 cities in the U.S. and airing on Global TV in Canada. But they could no longer call the show Second City Television because Bernie Sahlins owned the name and took it with him when he left the show. So the name SCTV was born.
We were always doing new openings on SCTV, and John was really good at coming up with concepts. And then John said, we really got to do it. Not like fake, not just one TV. We got to throw a lot of TVs.
We all stood out on the balcony and threw the megaphone, 1, 2, 3, and we heaved them. It was the signature of the show.
Yes, SCTV was on the air.
In this season, Harold's behind-the-scenes character Mo Green, the sweating SCTV accountant, brought another famous SCTV character to life, station owner Guy Caballero.
Now I'd like to introduce the president of SCTV, Mr. Guy Caballero.
Guy took center stage when Harold and Mo left the show.
And I said, how am I going to do this guy? What does he look like? And I'd seen a movie called Key Largo with Lionel Barrymore, who was in a wheelchair.
Please, Mr. Caballero, I had a nervous breakdown, can't you see?
But we thought, well, we didn't want to offend any actual paraplegics, so he can walk. He's fine.
You're a fake, Mr. Caballero. You just use that wheelchair for sympathy.
I use it for respect. And Harold Ramis said, you use the wheelchair for respect. And that's a non sequitur to me. I thought, for respect. That doesn't make sense, but it sounds funny. All right, I'll do it.
I'd like to introduce our new station manager, Mrs. Edith Breckley.
So Edith Prickley became the SCTV station manager, and a lovably tacky leopard skin draped character was added to the cast. Guy Caballero and Edith Prickley became two of SCTV's most identifiable and enduring characters.
The little people out there want to see the little people up there. People like Bobby Pittman. People that we can all relate to.
But what really distinguished SCTV was the uncanny ability of the cast to do dead-on impersonations of celebrities.
I want to be Pout! Pout! Pout!
Joe Flaherty did the very first impersonation on SCTV, and as soon as Joe did Peter O'Toole, I remember Catherine and myself and other people, we really looked at that and went, oh, we don't have the money to bring any guests on the show, but we could be the guests.
Katharine Hepburn tells us about her first time.
Oh, I won't say what year it was. That would be telling too much.
So that was a seminal and turning point in the show.
Catherine did Katharine Hepburn pretty early on.
Nevertheless, I believe opportunity knocks. You've got to say, hell, how do I know I may not get another chance at this one?
And Dave wanted to look like Bob Hope.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lou Jaffe, and I'm here at the Bob Hope Desert Classic.
Doing the impersonation of Bob Hope, I didn't really know how to do it. I kind of did him with a high, whiny voice up until then. But then when Bev Scheckman, the makeup artist, put the nose on, and she slicked my hair back and did some eye makeup and everything, and I was looking at my jaw is not like his. Do you have like a jaw thing? She said, if I put a jaw thing on, it'll fall off.
So I just suggested to him that he throw his jaw out to the side.
And as soon as I did that, as soon as I stuck my jaw out, it was like, oh, it's like I found the character thanks to Bev Scheckman.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're here at the 14th hole with Gold in my air. And I want to tell you that pipeline's some hazard there, but Gold is a gal with a mean slice.
Oh. Come on, baby. Oh.
Mr. Chuck Heston, ladies and gentlemen.
These celebrity impersonations, combined with a new type of multi-layered writing where different stories intertwined, became the unique trademark of SCTV. And Joe and I sat down and wrote Fantasy Island. It was our first sort of multi-layered piece where we started out with two rock musicians that go to Fantasy Island.
Look, man, a midget. Wow!
Hey, man, have you got any non-liquid refreshment, if you know what we mean?
Shut up, you marijuana-soaked bird brains.
Gene did a very funny Ricardo Montalban. John was a very funny Harvey Villachez.
I know what your fantasy is, boss.
What are
You want to tie women up with crazy leather
Shut
and
up.
put coffee beans all over their bodies.
Shut up, Patu.
I know that's what you're into.
Shut up, you little
You're
twat.
here,
Take
boss.
you,
I know you're... Wow, boss!
We took my Bob Hope impersonation that I'd done in Joe Played Bing, and then we put them in a kind of a Road to Bali type parody, and then we moved that parody to the landscape of Casablanca.
Excuse me, but do you mind if we join you at the table? We're on the lam from the law.
Don't worry about the law here. She's a spy and I'm a gun. Sit down.
And then we broke it down and turned it into Wizard of Oz. So we were like moving through a television show and one movie and another movie and another movie, and it was a whole show.
Fine. Well, then close your eyes, click your heels 3 times and say, I wish I were back in Kansas.
Well, we're not from Kansas.
Now, Junior, do it anyway.
All right. I wish I wasn't.
Well, we saw what we could do with parodies. So we weren't as satisfied necessarily just doing a single parody. We always thought, you can always open these things up and do more. We'll see where it takes you.
After 2 seasons, Global couldn't afford to produce the show any longer. So at the end of 1979, SCTV went off the air for nearly a year.
So that looked like the end of the show. And you know, the White Knight came along.
That White Knight was Dr. Charles Allard, who owned an independent television station in Edmonton called ITV. He, Andrew Alexander, and Len Stewart put together a deal that allowed SCTV to go back into production.
Not everyone was available. John was doing a show called Big City Comedy, and Catherine decided to take a year off. Andrea and Eugene came up and said, well, we'll give you 2 weeks, and then we got to get back to LA to audition for sitcoms.
To round out the cast, Andrew hired Robin Duke and Tony Rosato from the Toronto Second City main stage. He also hired Rick Moranis.
So I'd met Rick at a party, Rick Moranis, and I thought he was very funny. So I suggested to Andrew that he hire him.
I've got here the Shogun Sushi video dinner, Godfather 1 linguine, Godfather 2 cannelloni, meatballs. I kind of like that one, and on the list goes.
He and I started doing stuff together because he's fast. Cronkite and Brinkley, Angus Crock and Rabbi Karloff. There's like a lot of duos, a lot of two-handers.
Carl's cut. Free delivery. Cut.
He's a great mimic, I think Woody Allen is one of the first I've ever seen him do.
I mean, there's nobody else here. I mean, you're talking to me? Who you talking to?
They really focused on television parody, and I noticed that nobody had really show. And I wrote a piece where Robin was coming in as a stunt woman. She should be. What a fantastic stunt, everyone! And she said, okay, why don't you break a chair over my head?
Oh, it's a stunt chair for sure.
They make it just a space. Now, they've broken it all up into pieces and re-glued it. But of course, they re-glued it like with cement. So the thing's got like real body to it.
Get ready, it's gonna be a big smash. Look at these chairs are strong. Okay, here it comes now.
You can see my, in pain as the chair hits my back.
Oh my God! She's dead! She's dead! I killed it!
I shook it off. I was a professional.
I'm fine. I'm a stunt woman.
Oh boy!
I'm a stunt woman.
Hey, Betty, you took...
Kept going. You keep going, don't you?
We needed writers, so we brought in Dick Blasucci and Paul Flaherty. My brother Paul, who, I knew I could vouch for it, having a sense of humor.
It was kind of our first real job, so it was intimidating.
And we were just these neophytes that were thrown into the middle of it, and it took a while. We just had to crack it and come up with our first premises and see them look upon them approvingly.
Before there were ever matches, the Indians used to take 2 sticks and rub them together like this.
Oh. Snappy, I'm hurt bad. Go to the doctor, get help.
Once they got it and once they were comfortable, they were not only fast, but they had a very specific style that they brought to the show. And that is the use of dummy.
Oh, I'm too rambunctious. Oh, isn't this something?
Dick and Paul were largely responsible for that sort of slapstick addition to the SCTV style.
Oh, was that good?
In Edmonton, the production team really came together in support of the cast. Some were local, and others came from Toronto.
The cast were the creative producers of the show. I was more the logistic side of producing. I was very fortunate. I had some great people behind the camera. And then you look at all the hair, the makeup, wardrobe people that were on the show. They're immensely talented.
Director John Blanchard brought a real cinematic look to the sketches.
He would nail parodies, just the detail. I mean, so he would work 24 hours a day because he'd go home, he'd look at tapes, reference tapes, and really study the detail of, anything he was shooting.
From Istanbul, Turkey, it's the Midnight Express special with the night's special hosts, Abbott and Costello.
We combined a rock concert with the movie Midnight Express, and on top of that, for some reason, the old Abbott and Costello shows.
This is hashish. Hashish. Hashish? What's the matter with you? Trying to smuggle dope across the border? Who's this? This is my friend, Buzz. I've never seen this man before in my life. You're both under arrest. Seize them. Seize them? I seize him. He's right here. Get it out.
Thanks to his brilliant timing, it's like playing tennis with somebody who's really, really good. It really kicks up your game.
Timing also played a role in the creation of SCTV's 2 most memorable Canadian characters, because it was during this 3rd season that the CBC picked up the show for Canadian broadcast.
Our topic is snow routes.
No, it's space.
And CBC required 2 more minutes of running time, so it was suggested let's do a 2-minute scene in every show that had a bit of a Canadian theme.
Well, I took that back to the office, and Dave and Rick happened to be there.
Rick and I sarcastically said,
you know, what he wants to do, like wear parkas and toques and fry up back bacon and drink little stubbies of beer, and have a Mappa Canada behind us.
Good day. I'm Bob McKenzie. This is my brother Doug.
How's it going, eh?
And this is the Great White North.
Yeah.
They converted it into that Bob and Doug's 2 minutes, and that was our answer.
Our mom got us these to keep us from biting our toenails, eh?
And like, they weren't that expensive, right? Like, I still got my price tag on it. It's,
Oh, geez, I got mine too, eh?
Same price.
Yeah. She must have got them at the same store, eh?
They would pick a topic. It was completely improvised.
The McKenzie brothers soon found their way into the shows that were being syndicated in the U.S.
And we did it as a mean-spirited joke to mock the CBC. We had no idea it would catch on.
Okay, great.
I brought an opener with me, eh?
Good.
If I can get it out of here, I got that.
Great.
Mine's already open, eh? I was,
What'd you do, suck it off the top?
There once were 7 people who started their own network.
NBC president Brandon Tartikoff had been a fan of SCTV and put the show in the network-owned stations following Saturday Night Live. When SCTV started to build a following, he decided in 1981 to give the show a late-night time slot.
This is the big time. You're getting a network opportunity. Unfortunately, the cast didn't agree with me. It was very hard. It was like it was wrangling the Magnificent Seven. I mean, they were all in different places in their life and careers.
Eventually, Andrew was able to reassemble the original cast, along with talented newcomer Rick Moranis.
They were given contracts to put SCTV back in business.
They wanted us to do an hour and a half. And we said, sure, we can do that. Then all of a sudden, we had to write a 90-minute show every week. We said, we can't do this. So that first year, we'd say to them, we don't have a show this week. I said, what do you mean you don't have a show this week? You gotta have a show. You were on network television.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, for the remainder of our programming day, we are proud to present SCTV Classics.
We convinced them that, and we put a lot of repeats in there from the earlier 3 seasons.
To help with the enormous amount of material they now had to write, Andrew brought in 10 additional writers.
Opie's been hanging around with some thugs, and they came into town one night, and they broke my barber pole.
SCTV's movie parodies became more and more elaborate. The Godfather was an audience favorite.
So we wrote Caballero being the godfather of SCTV.
Well, Floyd, what is it you want me to do?
Well, I want you to kill those thugs.
That's where John played Johnny Pavarotti. It was so much fun writing. It was easy for us because we loved the movie so much.
I knew you'd come. I love lasagna.
And we actually got John Marley, who was in the movie. He's the guy that's in the studio executive that wakes up in bed with the horse's head. We actually got him to play that part.
You better start talking, because a man in my position can't afford to look ridiculous.
You know my policy, no talking with strangers in a stable.
When it got down to the scene with the horse's head in the bed, we wanted it to be just like the movie, where he wakes up and screams, you know, in terror. When we got around to shooting the scene, he did one take, and he went, ugh. So I went over and I said, John, we were hoping that you could just do it more like the movie, like a bigger,
Sergio Faustino. Better give Johnny Pavarotti that part.
So I had to go over again, and I said, John, no, you really got to scream like the Godfather. He said, for these prices, I'm not screaming. Forget it.
They needed about 20 sketches for every show. Many of them had multiple sets, characters, and costumes, so the demands on the production team were enormous.
You keep saying, my dear.
Especially in Edmonton, as wonderful as the city is, there are no, at that time, there were no secondhand stores there, so it either had to be made, flown in from Toronto, or found, and it was always a pressure cooker, real pressure cooker.
Darling, is that someone at the door?
Yes, it is, my sweet, but we haven't been introduced.
You were forced to do it quickly, and we were always quite amazed with what we came up with.
Budgets were much higher. The deficits were also much higher. The cash flow and all that was much more complicated. So at any given moment, we could be $300,000 or $400,000 overdrawn at the bank.
So Andrew and his partner Len Stewart had to keep going back to NBC to ask for more and more money.
And about every month we'd go back, and they would reluctantly, say, okay, this is not the way to do business. But they kept backing it and kept putting up the money. So,
well, NBC, a variety of producers that they sent up to keep an eye on the show.
They ended up leaving as fast as they came because they'd get shut out. They would just get, they'd have an office and no one would come in, no one would talk to them. They'd have nothing to do. They'd come around, ask people what they were working on. People would clam up and,
It was kind of rebellious and defiant, really, because we were a family of kids, basically. And then some big old adult came in and tried to do who we didn't really respect. I mean, it really is like adolescence with parents, I think.
So there was a great deal of frustration. I believe we ended up going through 5 producers that NBC sent up. God bless NBC, they supported the show.
Most of the cast agrees that during this time, they produced some of their best work.
3CP1 on your dial, Russian television.
First, we say welcome to new viewers in Mellonville and Tri-City area.
Oh, what did you think? I put the box in the, I put it in the shot. What did you think of that?
It's terrific, Guy. Having the box in the shot is just more visibility for the product than we ever intended.
Did you see that? Yeah, he blowed up. Blowed up good. Blowed up real good.
I think Edmonton added to the creative spurts that we had.
Yeah, we weren't at home, so we had to think about but the show.
Right.
I love you, Lorna. I love you too.
We worked hard, many, like 17-hour days and 7 days a week, and that's really all we saw was each other.
So what was going on
very much.
in our own lives and in the station also got incorporated into the sketches,
Like Polynesian Town with the crane shot.
Polynesian Town was SCTV's parody of Chinatown. In the movie, there were slow shots created by using a camera crane. John Candy wanted those shots, and the crane became a real issue.
The idea of using a crane on SCTV had never crossed anybody's mind. It was too big, it was too expensive, we could never afford it. And I remember Candy coming in and says, "Patty, I gotta have a crane."
John was this larger-than-life character in real life, Johnny LaRue. Johnny LaRue was John. So, John would constantly be at things that were just not within the reasonable realm. So anyway, the crane became a symbol of John's excessiveness, and the producers kind of dug in and denied it, and John fought for it.
John was taking so much heat backstage with the producers for wanting that expense for the piece for Polynesian Town, so we just wrote it into different sketches.
Hey, what are you doing messing with my parking space?
We got orders from Mr. Caballero. This isn't your spot anymore.
Why? What'd I do?
Well, word is you went over budget on your last movie of the week.
Yeah? Well, we'll see about that. You calling me a drunk?
Johnny LaRue's Christmas street beef became an instant classic.
Get out of here, both of you! Can I be candid with you folks at home? Now tell me honestly, do you think that the Oliviers of this world, the Andy Devines of this world, do you think they had to beg for a crane shot? I think. Therefore, I am not.
They were out there with a small crew, one camera, and John was there kind of improvising that soliloquy that he did on the curb there.
Turn off the light, I'll show you the secret.
You'll need that light, Johnny.
What?
For the shot.
What shot?
Why, your crane shot.
Huh?
Merry Christmas, Johnny.
And then at the very end of it, he looks up and sees the crane backlit, and it's just the most glorious image.
That was all based on what we were experiencing doing the show.
By now, Bob and Doug McKenzie were getting fan mail, so Dave Thomas and Ritz decided to make a record. Before long, they had gold, platinum, and finally a quadruple platinum record that hit the Billboard Top 10.
It happened so fast, and it was completely out of our control. Rick and I were not in charge of the Mackenzies.
A record signing in Toronto turned into a hoser parade, and the police had to shut down one of the city's main highways.
And the cops are driving alongside, just keeping it orderly. When we got down to St. Man, there was like 5,000 or 10,000 people out into the streets blocking Yonge Street.
Once Dave Babadook took off, it was great for the show because it gave it a different profile.
When NBC realized how popular the Mackenzie brothers were becoming, they wanted an entire 90-minute episode of SCTV built around the characters. Dave and Rick were reluctant, but the network got its way. So the cast came up with a storyline where Guy Caballero exploits his new celebrities.
You boys don't get enough respect. I think you'll get it in his wheelchair, though.
The fact that the Mackenzie brothers were being singled out by the network and the media began to create some tension in the cast.
Oh, by the way, I wanted to tell you, your special's been canceled.
My special's been canceled.
Yes.
I'm not gonna let this lie down, First of all, friction develops on any show when stakes get higher and you're on network TV finally instead of syndication. But then things like in the media start to come out that were kind of unfair. I remember this thing in Rolling Stone that said Eddie's best joke on the cover, and it wasn't SCTV's best joke by a long shot.
They would get sometimes more attention at their height, you know, than the rest of us. So yeah, that kind of was like, why? What's that all about? That's not right. But what can you do?
It is unfortunately, I think, what happens when a show becomes popular and where you are no longer in total control of what you do or how you're perceived. To the public and sometimes to your own fellow cast members.
Dave and Rick decided to leave SCTV to make Strange Brew for MGM. So Second City Stage alumnus Martin Short was added to the mix.
I was obviously, naturally a little nervous about it, but I wasn't freaked out about it because these people who were doing the show were some of my oldest and dearest friends.
It logistically happened to be just as Rick and I were leaving. Rick and I were doing this parody where we played the two pigs as the guys going on the canoe trip from Deliverance. And we wanted Marty to play the mountain man, and he did. He was just fabulous.
Take our Bronco down to the landing. We'll pick it up tonight.
Because I remember seeing that film actually with Eugene Levy and saying, isn't it odd? I kind of look like that kid playing the banjo. And Eugene said, I'll tell you what's odder. You look exactly like the kid playing the banjo. I remember one of the earlier pieces in those first 3 90-minute shows was the PBS Battle of the Network Stars. And I remember climbing up the rope and just in a second thinking, I can do a flip and land on my back.
Representing Bill Buckley's team, enters the ring. Oh, look out there, Fred.
But I don't think that kind of stunt had been done a lot.
Thank you. And what just happened there? He grabbed a puppet. Oh, look at this. He's hitting Child with the lovable King Friday. And the Fred chef is down.
You can just improvise amazingly within a character or out of a character, just when he's on. And he's on almost all the time, so he really added that element of energy and sort of zany craziness.
That's certainly unpleasant.
Martin had only been part of SCTV for a couple of months when Catherine O'Hara decided to leave the show.
I'll be at home over Christmas, so don't count on me. Please have snow and mistletoe, but no hanky-panky.
Got kind of sick of the whole parody thing. Oh, it's still fun, and I still laugh at it. But, you want to create your own material that other people will parody.
She's the goddess of the silver screen. She's made well over 3 motion pictures, most of them X-rated. Here she is, the most divine.
So now it's just a cast of 5. John Candy, Eugene Levy, Andrea Martin, Joe Flaherty, myself.
They produced another 6 shows for NBC, but the network decided that the ratings just weren't high enough to just cost.
Damn these high-rises. When are they going to stop building them higher than our ladders can reach?
Then they said, we're not going to pay $600,000 for a midnight show. We're going to replace you. And we got replaced by who we thought was a kid at the time who, and his name was David Letterman.
I think there was greater naivety then within the cast, within all of us, to think, but if it's great quality, don't you want quality on your network? And the answer was, no, we want ratings. We want to be able to sell these minutes.
After NBC canceled the show in 1983, SCTV was picked up by Cinemax in the US and Super Channel in Canada. At this point, John Candy quit to pursue a movie career, and that left just 4 cast members to produce a 45-minute show every 2 weeks.
Just enjoy the new SCTV channel. It's the alternative choice. It's the ultimate choice. The only choice. It's the last choice.
We knew it was the last season. We knew it was, that was it. So we had fun. We said we were going to have fun that year. And we did some funny stuff, but it just didn't have enough people,
This is a school for pickpockets.
Pickpockets? Well, you can just count me out. First of all, pickpocketing, A, is against the law, B, like it's a crime, and C, it's illegal. So if you don't, you're on my way.
I wish you could get it up a little higher, Captain.
Oh, it's fine where it is. Anything yet?
Oh, it's just a bad night, I'm afraid. Oh.
Down Periscope.
Oh, down Periscope, up Periscope. You can drive a woman crazy with that kind of talk.
Oh, according to your calculations, we're on Neptune, are we? Well, what about me? I got calculations too, What we are? Neptune?
Oh! You fidget, grow up. You guys quit it now, or I'll take you back to the ship. I'll put on my Mennonite clothes, and I'll use my pitchfork on both of you. I mean it, too.
I think they'd all admit that, towards the end, we were just really, let's just get it done.
During its 8-year run, SCTV produced 185 hours of television. The show received 13 Emmy nominations and 2 wins for writing.
It carried out. It wasn't like that we had a huge, big party, and, I don't recall anything like that.
That's it. That's it for SCTV. And I'll tell you something. You can thank that viewing public out there for this, Edith.
It just felt for everybody it was time to wind it up.
The final curtain has fallen. The death knell has been sounded. For without you, we were nothing. But believe me, you haven't seen the end of SCTV. Whether it's from a tiny station in a little town like Mellonville or a satellite somewhere in space, there will always be an SCTV. Good night and good luck. Whew! Jeez, I think that message really worked. Let's start counting the bread. Happy days are here again. We're gonna have some root. We're
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Second City. Tonight, we're very pleased to bring you scenes from the Second City directly here in Chicago in the Cabaret nightclub into your theater in the home. These scenes were originally improvised by actors, both on ideas that they had and lines that they made up as they went along, and from suggestions from the audience. Audiences such as you see here tonight at the Second City.
Hi, I'm Joe Flaherty. When I was a kid, a long, long time ago, comedy was something written and then performed. The idea of going out in front of an audience without a script and just improvising, well, was unheard of. Then along came Second City. From the beginning, improvisation was the company's stock and trade, its signature. It became famous for just winging it, along with many of its members. Improv grew from its roots at Second City to all but take over today's comedy. A lot of what we laugh at now is written the way we used to write our material at Second City, which was to improvise from an idea that we thought had potential, and then, if the audience laughed enough, we would keep polishing it until it became a sketch. Like this piece about 2 German hitchhikers.
That was good. We were thinking, our luck was going so bad when our car broke down, and then, I see now 2 beautiful young Fräuleins have picked us up, and...
How long have you been in Canada?
Since 1952.
What'd you do in Germany?
We did nothing.
Oh,
We did nothing in Germany, nothing.
Take a look at the pictures that line the walls of Second City's theater. They tell a story in a glance, how Second City came to dominate today's comedy. And Second City built its comedy on improvisation.
I prefer improvising to reciting lines. You just get to spark off somebody else, hear what they're doing, see where they're going, and follow the follower, as they say.
I guess I just love the comedy. It was so fun, improvising, making stuff up. There was a sense of euphoria, freedom, a high almost. You know, it was like a runner's high, or it was a great feeling.
I'm just here with the pork you ordered. The meat guy.
I know, but I haven't
put it in
seen
the
a
fridge
man
for you.
in so long.
Oh, well. Well, I'm a man, that's for sure, I guess.
What kind of pork were you talking about?
Oh, well, you know.
It's the best feeling. It's just nice. It's like bowling, I guess. You know, with culture.
Just like take me, for example, okay? I never thought I would be Playmate of the Year because I'm not blonde and I don't get along very well with Hef and it's really political. Also, I'm only a C cup and most of the other girls are a D or a double D.
For me, I think improvisation was a nice mix of the actor's brain and the writer's brain working together.
But it is like looking at a road ahead where there is no road and running out anyway. And then looking back and seeing that you made a road. And you're so happy with yourself that you sometimes run into a tree. Do you know what I mean?
No, I feel funny.
Ashamed to have a smoke with the old man,
I'm
huh?
not.
You're gonna get it. Have a smoke with me and you're gonna like it. Here, put that in your mouth. No, the other end, you moron. There. Suck back on that and head for freedom.
Speaking of which, Dad, when am I going to start feeling something?
What?
Well, I'm not feeling any kind of effect. When do I start feeling some sort of effect in some way? Dad, something just shot across my eyes!
Son, it's tracer bullets. It's the police. Get down, get down!
My tendency was to make each character look different, so I used to have a water dish, and I would change my hair and gel my hair and slick it down. Because I used to think, if you walked on stage and you got that opening laugh by looking like a lunatic, that was like one laugh down. And at least maybe they were on your side. They didn't hate you as much.
Fell over. Move that.
Improvisation can be incredibly scary for some people. For me, it didn't bother me so much because I always trusted the fact all I have to do is listen to what everybody else is doing out there and then respond to that. So you're just listening and having fun, and it's like the best kitchen party you can ever be at.
So we'll start with you, Mrs. Pearson. Why don't you just ask your husband an everyday question?
What did you do today?
Yes.
I woke up, went to work. No big whoop, no big deal. But after that, me and the guys, we met up at O'Toole's. We watched the game. We had the big screen, surround sound, you know, some wings, some beer. It was great. It was great. The Leafs were down by 2 goals the second period. That's not bad for them. Then I got in the cab and I came here and I'm talking to you now. So that was my day, and it was a good day. It was a very good day.
And it's a rush when a show's great or a scene's great, and you know you're making it up. I mean, it feels like nothing else.
It's also a rush when it stinks.
Yeah, different kind.
It's different. You really are
Rush
truly
of
alive.
Second City started that truly alive working without a net thing in Chicago back in 1959.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Second City.
The first half of the show was scripted pieces which were improvised. The second half was totally improvised. The cast would ask the audience for suggestions. That's when it got interesting and revolutionary.
Some suggestions from you and the audience. First of all, we'd like you to suggest a character.
And we'd get about, I guess, 30, 40 suggestions from the audience. And we would improvise the second half of the show.
Well, I think this is awfully sensual.
It don't do nothing to me, I tell you.
So we were killing ourselves full-time to hone our craft and being allowed to fail.
This was life-altering stuff. Learning to take chances and learning it wouldn't kill you to fail.
You're on the boards every night, 8 shows a week, writing, improvising, self-directing, collaborating, ensemble. It's just, you walk out of there confident.
Jim's big brother, the late John Belushi, was part of the Second City in the early 70s. When NBC created Saturday Night Live in 1975, almost half the original SNL cast came from Second City. John, Gilda Radner, and Dan Aykroyd.
There were 6 people who loved to watch television.
Hi, you know me, I'm Harry, owner of Harry's Sex Shop. I'm the guy with a snake on his face.
Second City launched its own TV show in 1976, a reaction to Saturday Night Live.
That's a cue. Good day.
SCTV would be nominated for 13 Emmys and win a pair for writing. So, by the mid-1970s, there was also a Toronto main stage and its TV offshoot. 2 dream homes for funny Canadians.
I loved SCTV, and that I had found out that it was shot in Scarborough. I'm from Scarborough, the borough in Toronto, and I loved Bob and Doug and John Candy and Catherine, just everybody I thought were great.
Second City was monumental in every aspect of my career after I did it, Second City Stage, because it A, taught you to trust your instincts, and it B, taught you to realize that you could get even bigger laughs without being worried about the punchline and joke, but just by aping human behavior.
Is that Liza with a Z? Oh, I think she's so sensational and yet very brave. Of course, I loved her mother, Judy Garland. Judy and Mickey and Judy, they were so incredible. They had so much inner energy. Of course, they were on pills from a very early age because of the studio MGM. Their heads were literally freaking out morning, noon, and night. Sparkle, Mickey. Sparkle, Judy. Up, down, up, down.
During his time on the Second City main stage, Martin created one of his most enduring characters, Ed Grimley. Ed went with Martin to SCTV and then to Saturday Night Live. And now there's Jiminy. Oh boy, is there Jiminy. Martin's latest creations got to be the most obnoxious, vacuous man on television. Jiminy Glick is the host of a TV talk show called Primetime Glick.
You know, when you flip around television, particularly in daytime or at night, and you look at the people and say, look at this idiot who has their own special, and people have to sit and talk with them and because they're promoting something and they have no choice. That whole package made me laugh. So Jiminy was someone who was not interested in people, felt that listening was the biggest mistake.
You're really clever, aren't you? I had 2 psychology classes, and I think that's
The
really
show's
helpful.
totally unscripted, so Martin draws heavily on his Second City improv skills.
Let's talk about The Daily Show.
Oh, yes.
And you had to replace Craig Kilborn.
That is correct.
Were you scared?
Oh, petrified.
Those are big shoes.
Very big shoes.
You don't like them?
I don't know the man.
You don't know the man.
I don't
Whatever
like the
pops into Jiminy's head is likely to come flying right out of his mouth.
man. How do you see through me?
Because you're very transparent.
Oh.
And I think it's because you give off nothing and nothing really lands, I think it makes me understand more about you.
Because it's always that compliment mixed with meanness. Like, you have great power and people love you, and it could be because there's a blandness to your eyes and a dullness and a face gives very little, and I think that's your strength. You kind of go, what? What? Was I just insulted?
My mom went with her company to see Second City at the old fire hall and said, there's this really funny guy, his name's Martin Short, he's just like you. I said, what? Oh yeah, he's really funny, you know, he's a little spark plug. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. You should definitely go. So at the age of 17, I applied for the workshops, and I was too young. 18, I applied for the workshops, gone in, and then on my last day of high school, I came downtown. My audition was at 12, and I was hired at 3. So on my last day of high school, I got hired for the Second City Touring Company. I was just turned 19. I didn't know anything. And I didn't even like pack a sandwich or anything. I had never eaten seafood. I had fish sticks. That was the only thing that I'd ever had. And they're like, you know, do you want to have salmon? And I'm like, you mean in non-fish stick form?
Mike spent 2 years with the touring company and then quit because he felt his career had stalled. And he was only 21.
They weren't going to promote me to the main stage company. And I said, well, I'm going to go to England for a couple of years.
In the UK, Mike was half of a successful 2-man comedy team, Myers and Malarkey. He came home in 1986 and went directly to Second City's Toronto main stage, where he got a chance to improvise every night.
and you get to be free and just go off on wonderful tangents. You don't know what's going to happen next. It's exciting, and it was great training.
While still in his early 20s, Mike starred in a Second City pilot that was pitched to CBS.
Is there some sort of yardstick I don't measure up to?
Why don't you step outside and cool off?
No, I love your
I'd
daughter.
appreciate it if you'd step outside.
Look, Kim told me
Get out
about
of
you,
my house,
all right?
understand me?
No, I'm gonna marry your daughter.
Get out of my
buddy.
house,
I'm
understand
still gonna marry your daughter.
You're not going to use it.
Don't tell me what to
Don't
do.
insult me, just get out of my house.
Don't tell me.
Get out of my house. You understand?
Kidding. It's just a lighter.
Upstairs in my medicine cabinet, there's some pills. My wife knows where they are. Just get them, all right?
Are you all right, Mr.
No, I'm not all
Johnson?
right. Just get the pills, all right?
What do you want me to do?
Get out. Just get the pills.
All right, okay, hang in there. Okay.
I'm kidding. Get back here. Come here. I'm kidding you. I'm kidding.
CBS never produced, but there was starting to be a buzz around young Mike. He moved to the Second City stage in Chicago for a few months, and then the call came to meet with Saturday Night Live exec Lorne Michaels.
It was really vague. He says to me, is this something you'd be interested in doing? I said, yeah. So you are pro being on the show? I was like, yeah. Okay, so, and you write? Yes. Okay, that sounds great. What does that mean? So I laughed, and for 6 years I was never quite sure that I was actually hired, and never quite sure that I wasn't gonna get fired every week.
Linda Rickman, the host of Coffee Talk, was one of the many characters Mike created at Saturday Night Live. But it was another Myers character that would make Mike a household name. Well, not Mike exactly, but Wayne. Wayne Campbell of Wayne's World movie fame.
I used to do it for my friends in the courtyard of our townhouses. Then I did it on Much Music with Christopher Ward, and then I did it on Main Stage. And then I did it on a show called It's Only Rock and Roll.
Let's start with bad English and heavy metal, okay? Let's go to Led Zeppelin. Zepp, right? There's an A in Led Zeppelin, right? Unless they were thinking like Led Zeppelin as in coerce Zeppelin. I don't know. I'm not Led Zeppelin. Let's have a look at Rat. Rat with 2 T's? Nice try. Good cover though, eh? Bonus. Let's have a look at Motley Crue. Hey, boys, that's not how you spell crew, all right? And look, there's an umlaut over the U. That's German. That's not even English.
By the end of the 90s, the young man who called Second City his graduate school was one hot commodity. Starring in Cat in the Hat, Shrek, and of course, Austin Powers.
I won't bite. Hard.
I never thought it would work out so well. I never did. I was not going to give up, and I was going to try my hardest. But I had no idea that I'd be so lucky. And I feel very, very grateful to have worked with so many great, great comedians.
Red Green's nerdy nephew Harold, also known as Patrick McKenna, earned his stripes at Second City.
I worked at Second City on the door as the night manager. And then they had auditions one Saturday afternoon while I was setting up the theater. And they said, you can stay, you can go. And later that afternoon, I was in the touring company.
Expo 86. When Second City went to the West Coast for the World's Fair, Patrick was with them.
So you're all set then? Oh, good. Oh, did I tell you my puppy got hit by a bus today? Oh, my God. Quick, next.
It was in Vancouver in the mid-1980s that 3 of Second City's funniest guys came together for the first of many comic encounters. Patrick McKenna, Colin Mockery, and Ryan Stiles. Well, kind of came together. You'll see what I mean.
They wanted some local people. They wanted to mix it with their some touring company people from Toronto and then some local people.
Hi, I'm your home. What's she doing here?
They auditioned and I got in there, and that was really good for me because I was doing stand-up at that time and really wasn't an actor. It gave me the chance to work with a lot of really good people and to work as a cast.
Ryan had never done improvisation before, so I sort of taught him what Second City was like, and then when it was over, he taught me what stand-up was like.
After Expo, Patrick went off on his own to do stand-up, while Ryan went directly to Second City's main stage in Toronto, and he recommended an old buddy of his for the touring company, Colin Mockery.
One of the best things that ever happened to my life was meeting Ryan Stiles. I first met him when he was actually doing stand-up, and I was in improv.
I think we both got kicked out of theater sports together because we used to like to bring a bottle of scotch before the show, and they were very, no scotch, no drinks.
I mean, through Ryan, I ended up with a wife. Through him, I got Second City and Whose Line. So he's been a major, I'm pretty sure I'm the father of my child, but he has done a lot for me.
Undoubtedly, it was Colin's talent that got him the job in the touring company in 1986. But it was a plug from Ryan that got him the audition in front of the director, who would later become Colin's wife.
Deb at that point was directing the touring company. So I auditioned, and it was between me and the cute guy. And
He'll
the cute
tell
guy,
this story the day we die.
the cute guy didn't get it.
But I thought he was great, fantastic, and funny. And then, you know, there was the one day, funny and cute,
After Deb and Colin got married, Colin got promoted to the main stage, where his buddy Ryan was busy building up his improv skills.
You just look great.
Oh, you look great. You look really good.
Oh, I just wish you were with me to experience it all, you know?
So do I.
You know, when they first put me in prison, I thought it was going to be hell, but I'm having a great time.
When Ryan left Second City for the bright lights of L.A., he was replaced by that other musketeer, Patrick McKenna. Now it was Colin Mochrie and Patrick on Toronto main stage.
Colin was one of those people that just immediately, he made me laugh. I could just look at the guy and he would make me laugh because there was just always something going on with him in his eyes on stage.
I believe my last words should be recorded for posterity. Excellent idea, so great. This tiny
Like a Noel Coward trying to give his last words, and I was his foppish secretary trying to write them down, who was always getting his way before he could get his last words out.
No, I don't want you to write everything, just my last. No, you're writing everything. No, stop. Stop. I want you to stop. I want you to stop. 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 No, stop. Stop.
While these two were on stage in L.A., Ryan Stiles was going for a spot on the British comedy hit, Whose Line Is It Anyway? They needed improvisers, perfect for a Second City grad. But the auditions were brutal.
They were about 4 hours long, and if there was 30 people in the room, they would say, "You've all been great. Fantastic job, all of you. I'm going to call out a few names, and then could the rest of you leave? That'd be great, thank you." He'd call out about 10 names, and those people would stay. Then you'd do about another 2 hours. You're all lovely. We're going to call out 4 or 5 names, and the rest of you, could you please leave and thank you? It was like that. And you're against all your friends that you have done improv with for years at clubs. It was just horrible.
It took a second audition a year later before Ryan became a member of the UK Whose Line cast. And a year after that, Whose Line held auditions in Toronto. And who tried out for the show but Ryan's old buddy Colin Mochrie, along with a group from Second City. Because they were acting as true improvisers, making the other guy look good, nobody stood out.
So as a result of that, none of us got the job. Then the next year, we had just moved to LA. The Whose Line people came through again, and this time I auditioned with 50 people, none of whom I knew. So it was like, look at me, look at me. And through that, I got the job.
Colin would spend the next 7 years doing Whose Line in the UK with Ryan. Patrick, meanwhile, was busy creating a character that would become a Canadian television classic.
Feel it happening? Feel the magic? The Harold character that I do in the Red Green Show started at Second City, actually, in a scene that we were doing about grade 3 students presenting a class project.
There, and then you're all pretty much set.
Television's quirky handyman, Red Green, came one night to see the Second City show.
And I was looking for a second banana for my show, and I went down to Second City not to see Patrick's. In fact, absolutely not to see Patrick, because I knew Pat, I kind of knew what he did, and he just wasn't, I knew he wasn't the guy. He was a friend, but he wasn't the guy. So I'm watching the rest of them. I think there were 7 of them on stage.
Colin Mochrie was in that scene, and he was out in the audience, and he'd ask my character questions as I'm trying to present my project to the class, trying to get through it. They'd interject all the time and ruin this project for me. And the audience was just laughing so hard at the way this character would twitch and move and this and that. I found that I could be a real bad boy on stage if I wanted to be by twitching at the wrong time, because the audience couldn't watch this character. It was just like this car wreck, this character.
He was Harold, and he had all the stuff going, and I just thought, well, that's it. And as your advisor, I think I deserve 10% of the $100 grand.
Okay. $100. Okay.
Harold, 10% of 100 grand is not $100, all right? It's 1,000.
A leading Republican said Sunday that President Bush is so worried about Social Security that he's only able to sleep 10 hours a night.
Tina Fey, the popular co-anchor of Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update, is another star who got her comedy training at Second City.
You want me to drive you down to the mall parking lot so you can meet boys? I don't think so.
Why not? You used to do that.
You're
down at the mall parking lot every night.
That is different.
I had studied acting in college and playwriting, and it was not until I started studying improvisation in Chicago that I really felt like I found, oh, this is what makes sense to me. This is the kind of work I want to do. I'm an improviser first. And the idea that when you're improvising, you are serving your partner as opposed to being out there by yourself and showing off.
Wicked is a mother and daughter sketch that grew out of an improv between Tina and Rachel Dratch.
You like your goddamn father. You got your, the
Oh my
head
God,
of your father,
please
the
don't
hair of your
stop with
father, the beady little eyes of your goddamn father. You smell like your father.
The only reason I smell like my father is because you won't let me wear perfume and I have to wear Old Spice.
It's part of the Second City process to continue polishing the improvised sketch offstage before bringing it back to an audience again.
I didn't want to tell you this, but you're not a model. And you don't need a model portfolio.
No, Wicked put me down right now. You are giving me a negative body image.
Jesus Christ, Abby, you just had 10 pieces of cheese at Hickory Farms.
Ma, you're gonna give me a negative body image, all right? Seriously, 7 out of 10 teenage girls have a negative body image.
Yeah, well, 6 of them girls are right.
You don't know what's gonna come out of your mouth. You don't know what's gonna come out of your partner's mouth. And so it's just like a, an amusement park ride or something. It's just when it goes well.
Improvising there is a huge amount, but there's a really fun free fall when once you've done it a bunch of times and had it go really, really poorly. There is a freedom in that free fall that is kind of like skydiving, and that's when you find something interesting that you couldn't possibly have planned to find.
I brought my son here for his first day of kindergarten. This is Jamie.
He's a very handsome boy.
He's part gargoyle.
Scott Adsit is another Second City performer Tina loved working with.
You start if you're cheating this way, your TV's right in front of you. If you go just state the biggest story of that.
Here they rehearse a sketch where a businessman is called a stripper to his hotel room.
You like your job? Are you happy at your job? No. Then shut up. I'll tell you something, mister. I got more dignity and pride than you ever will. You are a desperate, pathetic, tiny little weasel.
In 1997, Tina took the improv skills she'd sharpened at Second City and headed for the bright lights of New York, and a writing job with Saturday Night Live. It took a little while to make the transition from winging it to writing it.
When I was told to, sit down at your computer, write something and turn it in, I kind of froze up because I wasn't used to sitting down and writing things. I was used to improvising and re-improvising. So that took a couple weeks getting used to, trying to write things by myself.
Within 2 years, she was promoted to head writer, the first woman in the job. But after a while, Tina needed to get back on stage.
My mom says I've got ADD. I say maybe if it stands for all day dreaming. She was writing for the show, and I was living in LA, not doing anything, longing for Second City. And so I think I just called and asked her if she would ever want to perform, and I think she was missing performing.
Well, you better quit daydreaming in school if you want to be an astronaut.
Yeah, my dad says you gotta get good grades.
That's right, you have to get good grades and you have to have perfect teeth. Have you ever had a cavity, Tommy?
Just one.
Then you'll never be an astronaut.
For their two-woman show, Dratch and Fey, Rachel and Tina improvised a series of sketches in rehearsal. And when something clicked, they put pen to paper.
You look 18.
I look better than 18. I look 12.
Hey, how about a boob We wrote this show in 2 weeks, and it saved my mental health. No, it was so nice to be doing something again.
Oh, shut yourself out! Look how high it is! I could lick my own nipples! With greater ease!
Dratch and Faye landed Rachel a spot on Saturday Night Live and got Tina the job as co-anchor of Weekend Update, a move that has made her a household name and suddenly a sex symbol.
When I came here, I very much looked like I was from Chicago. I had short hair, kind of curly on top, and I was a size 12, and I, ate a lot of hot dogs and hamburgers, and I was very happy, too. But then you get to New York, and everyone's really like, oh gosh, everyone's really slender and Asian. I have to become slender and/or Asian to fit in. Everyone's fabulous.
By 2003, Tina was herself among the fabulous. Magazines were putting her on their 50 most beautiful people lists, and many talked about her bookish sex appeal. While still full-time at SNL, Tina wrote a movie, Mean Girls.
I thought that there was something funny about the lengths that girls go to destroy each other.
She's also on screen as the teacher who helps the Mean Girls find their inner niceness. Early in 2005, Tina signed a $4 million deal with NBC for SNL and a new series. She says she owes it all to improv and Second City.
You made your case, but I'll talk to you because I don't want you getting pregnant.
I'm not gonna get pregnant.
That's what I said.
It was all-encompassing work at the time. When you are there, when you're in Chicago and you're an improviser, it is everything to you. It is a complete cult and a church and everything to you. And it, I think, completely shaped the kind of writer I am today and and everything about me.
Well, by now you've probably got the idea. We improvisers are proud of what we do. We wouldn't consider it less than acting. And in fact, if we were to be really honest, we'd say that it's something more. It's an ability to see easily into the human condition and then quickly select those moments that translate into performance. Great improvisers often make great actors, and that's because they understand character is about choices.
Alan Arkin went from Second City to the dramatic stage to Hollywood, and he credits his success to improv.
About half the movies I've done, I've gone in and said, I like the script, I like the idea of the character, the dialogue stinks, these scenes don't work. Can we improvise and play with it until we have something that makes sense? And I'm hardly ever been denied that.
For example, Grosse Pointe Blank, where Alan plays a reluctant therapist to hitman John Cusack.
But you might just consider the possibility that part of your problem, part of the thing that's making you so miserable is the angst over killing a lot of people. Maybe just put it in the background there.
Come on. If I show up at your door, chances are you did something to bring me there.
I hated the character altogether that they wanted to give me. How would you do it? I said, well, I'd like to do it this way. They got John Cusack on the phone. I was in New York, he was in California. We got on the phone and we just started improvising and started honing all the material down. And about 40 minutes in, we had all the scenes the way we wanted, and I went out and shot all my stuff 3 days later.
Harold Ramis was on the Chicago main stage in the early 70s. He went on to become a big-time Hollywood actor, writer, and director, working on movies like Ghostbusters, Groundhog Day, and Analyze This and That.
There are things I call guided improvisations where you build a scene. It's like writing it down. You actually write it on film. You do the first take, and some of it works, some doesn't. You fix what didn't work. You do a second draft on film. And, through the miracle of editing, which is great, you can forge a pretty great scene without ever having put pen to paper.
Harold directed Caddyshack and co-wrote it. A lot of the scenes he improvised with Second City grad Bill Murray.
Bill Murray's part is entirely improvised except for one speech. And it would Bill and I would talk, we'd have a germ of an idea, and we'd start building these things take after take. Sometimes he was just brilliant. First take. He's probably the best improvisational actor I've ever seen.
Harold was a co-writer on Stripes, so much of it was improvised, as was Ghostbusters. Both were directed by Ivan Reitman.
Sometimes you start to shoot even though you know your script isn't perfect, but Ivan was never worried because we would just improvise. So a lot of important scenes were improvised.
When Alan Arkin steps out of the limelight to direct, he prefers working with improvisers.
I know my time is cut in half because they have a sense of where they belong in the entity. And most actors don't know about the entity, don't care about the entity. They read their character, they read their lines, and the director's got to spoon feed them where they can go and where they can't go in order to make the shape of the whole piece work.
When I first went into audition for the Trader Show, I had this ability to think, well, I'll just do everything different that I know everybody else has done, because the breakdown was calling for a man who was about 6'4", 260 pounds, big, aggressive, and I wasn't that physical type at all, so that's why they didn't want to see me. But improvisation teaches you to make a new choice. Think of something different. Think of the next level down, not the first thought in your head. Think about the third thought sometimes. Second City kind of teaches you to read between the lines. And that real ability has been my benefit at acting all the time, is that I make choices that other people don't make.
In 1998, Patrick proved his point and made Gemini history.
And the Gemini goes to
Steve Smith and Patrick McKenna, the new Red Green Show.
I was in seventh heaven that we were acknowledged as comedy guys that year. It was just fantastic. So I was sitting out in the audience, and then came the dramatic announcement.
And the Gemini goes to Patrick McKenna!
It was amazing, because, you know, from a guy who was working the door and afraid to be an actor, suddenly you're getting awards for comedy and drama. It's a dream come true. You never think anything like that's ever going to happen. And, you know, my school that I learned anything was Second City. That's the only place that ever taught me how to be funny, how to read a script, how to interact with people. All that stuff came from Second City. So if any training I ever had, it came through there.
In 1998, Whose Line with host Drew Carey debuted in the United States. It made Second City grads Colin Mockery and Ryan Stiles two of the most famous improvisers on the planet.
We're gonna have to make a diversion so they come out and I can sneak in and get the garment. Fire! That was easy.
I know where he's going, I'd say probably 90% of the time. And when I don't, I totally trust him to take me wherever. And it'll be great and it will work out.
Wait! The faucet's rigged! What? The faucet's rigged! In what way? With an explosion! Oh! How long have you been a spy? I didn't see that. I guess I really don't want people taking baths in this room.
When I break him up, I feel so proud and so happy.
Anyone coming? No.
It's perfect! It's always something he does that just gets me for some reason. And then I usually, because he plays that like, what are you laughing at type thing, it gets me even more.
Television, I don't think it really is conducive to improv, like real improv. I mean, because of the time constraints, you have to be shticky and jokey, and you know, the characters are pretty shallow. These are things that are frowned upon in the world of improv. But it's what was needed for television. So, I mean, I'm very proud in a way, but Whose Line is sort of like the vaudeville burlesque of improv.
It might be broad stroke stuff, but Whose Line made improv mainstream.
We all saw, you know, more people signing up for workshops and training center after Whose Line became successful.
I want everyone to move around the room, making your own unique sound and your own unique walk, all at once.
Second City got famous as a comedy troupe, but there's another side to the company that's growing fast. Training, all kinds of training, has become Second City's bread and butter.
We do a lot for corporations and CEOs of big companies, Fortune 500 companies.
The team-building skills that are essential to improv work offstage, too.
Yes, and. Your job is to start with yes, and stay on topic.
With improv, because your job is to create the next moment, then you have to hear the previous moment. So improv plays right into great communication.
In Ontario, Second City also offers life skills training for school kids.
Daryl's for romance. If I could get from this section a genre for Carly. Opera. Okay.
One of the island's heart was so small, so big, and so full of love that
they all fought and knew they were going to die.
They watch a bunch of fairly young adults taking fairly big risks right in front of them, and these kids get it. When there's no script, they know we're out there flying, but the key is that you try. So we named it all Fearless Learning.
Anyways, I really liked what you were wearing. My favorite was the shirt. It had that cool pattern on it. It kind of looked like a cow.
We don't want you to be afraid if you make a mistake. And you don't have to be perfect. And you can be in the moment and share a part of your heart because people will love you for it. They won't criticize you.
Oh, Ronaldo! I noticed you on the playground too. And the thing I noticed about you most was your socks.
Very happy to be there, moving through the space very gracefully. And let's begin the reunion. Go.
This is Toronto's top-end conservatory class. The next Mike Myers or Tina Fey could be in this bunch. Second City now offers all levels of training everywhere there's a theater. Toronto, Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas. There's also a training center in New York.
There we go.
It has grown into an extraordinary system of, over 3,000 students a week. And virtually everybody that we hire comes through that training center.
Around Second City stages everywhere, young comics grab whatever jobs are going to help pay for their training and to be close to the action.
We are sold out for our 8 o'clocks on our main and ETC stage, though.
This is the Chicago box office at the original Second City stage. And the young woman selling tickets has a special connection to the company.
13 tickets.
She's Jennifer Candy, the late John Candy's daughter. So Jen's been around comedy since she was a toddler. Now 25, Jennifer came to Chicago from LA after university. She wanted to get a real education in improv.
I decided I wanted to go to the conservatory program because it was the highest level of training that you could get at Second City.
Can't you walk?
Yes,
Okay,
actually.
so you have to do the sign-up sheets, okay?
The sign-up sheets
yeah,
over there.
And get all the water bottles and stuff are over there, okay?
Okay.
How long is the walk again? 52 miles.
52 miles.
Yes.
I support breast cancer. I just don't want to walk that
Sign-up sheets
long.
and the water bottles are right over there.
It's nice to work in an atmosphere where he once worked and where he once was on stage there.
Chicago's Second City is both an ambition and a dream come true for Jennifer Candy. She'd like to make it onto the main stage one day, but for right now, it's cool to just be here, where her dad got his start. And when she goes home at night, it's to his old address.
This is actually the same building, not the same building that my dad lived in. He was on the 3rd floor and I'm on the 4th floor. And so he lived here when he started out working at Chicago. So it's kind of like a correlation, a connection that I think is really cool that we have.
Second City is the connection between so many great actors, the mothership from which people took off to conquer new worlds, especially in comedy. Often you'll hear our alma mater remembered as just that, a great without equal.
It was my college. I went from high school to Second City, and I felt like I got accepted to Harvard.
It has been this great vehicle where anything is possible, and it's like going to the best university imaginable to study psychology, if you are interested in psychology.
If I didn't do Second City, I have no idea what I'd be doing. I'd probably still be doing stand-up.
It defined for me the kind of work I wanted to do, the way in which I could still be a performer. Because if I had had to be a regular Stanislavski method actor, I would not have made it, and I would be teaching English in high school somewhere right now.
And even if they don't become stars in the sense of what people recognize, the amount of contribution the people that went through Second City have done to Canadian entertainment is incredible, from the writers, the producers, the directors.
Here comes death, about to take my last breath. Here he comes to take me now. Stop him with bugger off, you silly cow.
Still coming up with, some of the best comics of the day, some of the best comedians of the day. I think as long as there's Second City, there will always be a funny world.
Hey, God, man! A simple request! I just asked you to write down my last words to posterity, and you just... Oh, fuck.